When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, Red Ranger. User, Rowdy Ranger 89. Posted, November 16th, 1996.
I bought the Ranger on a Saturday that smelled like cut grass and cigarettes. Mr. Jimmy counted out my pay in 20s at the shop, a squat cinderblock building that sweats tar even when the calendar says it shouldn't, and he slapped the stack into my palms like he was passing me a dare. "Don't spend it, stupid," he said, half smiling under his Cardinals cap, roof grit shining in the brim. I'd been hauling shingles since March, climbing ladders until my legs shook and my shoulders burned a slow heat I was proud of. I wasn't gonna spend it, stupid. I'd been saving for this. Buck, the guy who sells tools out of his garage and cars off his front lawn, had a red 1989 Ford Ranger parked by the ditch with a sign tucked under the wiper. 1989 Ford Ranger runs good, red. It's the kind of sign that tells you the truth and not a lick more. Single cab, 5-speed, a little tear in the bench seat like a cigarette scar. It was baseball helmet red, the kind you scratch sliding head first, and when I turned the keys, the engine caught with a stubborn little growl like it had something to prove. I felt the vibration in my palm and thought, this is mine. Buck and I shook on it, and he tossed in a rubber floor mat and a dented magnetic parts tray like he was sweetening the deal. The odometer read something north of 200,000, but the clutch bit clean and the shifter slid into first with a notch that felt like a handshake. I rolled down the window and let the air slap my face. On the way home, I kept catching my reflection in storefront glass, an actual truck and me inside it. I felt taller. It was the first thing in my life I'd paid for outright, with money that had chewed my hands into callus. If pride has a sound, it's a little engine turning steady while you idle at a light. At home, Mom stepped out on the stoop and shaded her eyes like she couldn't believe they were seeing right. "That yours?" she asked. "All mine," I said, like it could stay true forever. The cab smelled like hot vinyl and the ghost of a pine air freshener crushed long ago. The radio worked if you coaxed the tuner just so. The tape deck buzzed when the bass hit, but it would play anything it could get its teeth on. Kayla, my girlfriend since sophomore year, who writes the neatest bubble letters, made me a mixtape labeled Fall Mix 96. Side A opens with Stone Temple Pilots. Side B has Mazzy Star, right where the streetlights always catch the windshield. The dash glowed a soft green at night, like the truck had its own little aquarium hung behind the speedometer. In Willow Bend, where 10 minutes in any direction turns to fields and wind and telephone poles hoisted like mile markers in a flat eternity, a truck like that is a passport. I started taking back roads everywhere. School, work, nowhere at all, making loops that meant nothing, just to feel the gear shift warm under my palm. Mr. Jimmy noticed the spring in my walk. "Truck'll make a man out of ya," he said, which I guess was a compliment, though I've been hauling his shingles all summer already. Kayla noticed too. She liked how close the bench seat put us. Her knees turned toward me, her hair brushing my shoulder when I downshifted. We'd parked by the river where the earth smells like cold iron and listened to the engine tick as it cooled. She'd talk about colleges out of state. I'd nod and pretend the word out didn't feel like a door closing. But for once, I didn't feel small. I turned the key and the little red truck answered like a promise. One Thursday in late August, gym first period the next day, which meant no sleeping in, I dropped Kayla off after we watched Twister on VHS in her living room. Her parents came back early from prayer group, and I said my goodbyes on the porch with my hands jammed into my pockets, trying to look harmless and steady. The sky was bruised purple, low clouds hanging like cut drapes. The air tasted like old coins. I jogged down to the curb and slid into the Ranger, my own breath loud in the cab before the engine took over. I turned to the rock station out of Peoria. Guitars filled the space. I turned out onto County Road 6, the one that runs behind the drive-in, trees knitting above it into a tunnel. Window down, elbow out, knuckles catching air like spray from a boat. I loved that road, its shy curves, the way the field dust lingers like a thought you can't shake. The speedometer climbed and I let it, careful but not timid. I knew every dip and seam. The world felt big but manageable, like a job site you finally learned to walk without tripping. Halfway to the four-way, the radio fuzzed like a bee that crawled into the speaker. I smacked the dash with the heel of my hand. Mr. Jimmy's fix for a lot of things, and the music warped, sliding flat and then sharp, like a cassette chewed and spit back. I twisted the tuner and it snapped to the same place, stubborn, the needle wobbling back as if tugged by a small invisible hand. "Help," a voice said, shredded by static. "Please, someone." I laughed once because my brain needed it. "Okay," I said out loud to no one. "What is this War of the Worlds bullshit I'm hearing?" I kept my fingers on the knob, twisting, searching for that Peoria station or any station at all, and the power didn't click off. The tape deck's little red light glowed, but the spools weren't turning. The voice pushed up through the noise like a swimmer breaking the surface. "Evan?" it said. "The sound of your name when you don't expect it will knock a hole in you. My stomach dropped the way it does when you misstep on a ladder." "Kayla?" I asked, because who else would know me inside this truck at night? "I can't find my mom," the girl said. Not Kayla. There was a tiny whistle in the S, like air through a cracked tooth. "I'm cold, please don't leave me." I put 2 fingers on the volume and twisted it down to nothing, but it kept talking like it lived underneath the dial. The engine note hummed a steady C. The road narrowed its eyes. "Turn around," the voice said. "Help me." There's a thing that happens when you can't figure out a machine. Your body leans closer, like understanding is something you can physically move into. I leaned. I glanced at the tape deck because the heart wants causes. The cassette sat in its mouth like a tongue. I jabbed eject and the deck refused. Come on, I said, a plea I've never wasted on a human being but have offered to 100 pieces of equipment. The deer didn't care about any of that. It tore out of the ditch in a single impossible bound and became the whole world, legs tucked, eyes throwing back into the high beams like 2 coins. I stomped the brakes and felt the Ranger fishtail gravel spitting from the shoulder like sparks. My chest hit the belt. Dust exploded in front of the headlights, turning the trees to ghosts. The deer vanished into that cloud as if it were a door only deer know. And in the dust, something else took shape. It came on like a Polaroid developing. First, the suggestion of a person, then edges, then the pale swipe of a dress. A girl stood in the center of the road, bare feet, toes slightly turned in like she was bracing to be chosen last in gym, hair long enough to catch the light and send it back in funny colors that aren't on any paint chip. She didn't open her mouth, but the radio spat her voice anyway. Help me, please, don't go. I want to tell you I put it in park, that I climbed out and said, it's okay, the way you talk to a frightened dog, keeping your hands where they can see. I want to tell you I looked for house lights through the trees, that I remembered which mailbox has the missing flyer stapled to it, that I have it in me to be the person people imagine when they say the word good. But what I did was drop the Red Ranger into gear and stomp on the gas. The truck leapt forward. For a heartbeat, she filled the beams, white dress, and overexposed smear. I braced for the ruin of it, metal, glass, the wrong kind of history, but the impact never came. The cab temperature dropped like someone opened a walk-in freezer. The truck sailed through a place that felt hollowed out, like the space left after a body rises from a bed. On the far side, the engine note returned to normal, and the radio coughed once the way candles cough when you pinch the flame. Silence sat down in the passenger seat. I drove home by the long way without deciding to. My hands shook so bad, I stalled at the four-way and had to start over while a semi's headlight looked at me like a judgment. Willow Bend was emptied of something I had known it contained. The Casey's sign buzzed over a parking lot with a single soda bottle kicked under a pickup. The high school crouched in its brick like it could wait forever. The grain elevator stood with its back to me. I parked crooked behind our house and didn't cut the engine until it convinced me to. Inside, I went straight to my room. I lay on top of the covers and stared hard enough at the ceiling that the tiny bumps in the paint became storm systems. I could still see the dust lifting and settling in the beams, every particle its own planet, and her stepping through like the picture wasn't finished until she made it so. I could still hear the radio when the house was quiet, that bare scrape of static, the syllables climbing. Kayla called around 10. The machine on the kitchen counter picked up. Hey, it's Kayla. You home? You sounded weird when you left. Call me? Her voice came small after the beep, the way it does when words have to squeeze through plastic. I let it sit like a letter I wasn't brave enough to open. By afternoon, my heart had slowed to a manageable thud, but my hands hadn't. Mr. Jimmy called to ask if I could help him load a pallet into his van. Truck still running like a scalded cat? He asked. Yeah, I lied, because I didn't know what truth would even be. Watch that stretch behind the drive-in at night, he said. Deer wander up from the water, okay? His voice had a notch in it, a place he'd filed down telling kids that 100 times. I almost asked if anyone had called the shop about a voice on the radio, a girl in the road. The words made a fool of me before they were even spoken. Okay, I said, and let the quiet swallow the rest.
Subject, through the window. User, SteelTrap99. Posted, July 14th, 1999.
I had the perfect childhood. Not in the way people talk about beach vacations or Christmas mornings. I mean, it felt safe. My mom trusted me, and more importantly, she trusted the world. We lived in a small Tennessee town where folks still left their keys in the car and waved at you whether they knew your name or not. I had a red Schwinn with coaster brakes and a Walkman that chewed through batteries like they were candy. I'd ride for hours, sometimes with friends, sometimes alone, just drifting through the neighborhood with a dubbed tape of Men at Work or the Cars humming in my ears. I knew every shortcut, every crack in the sidewalk, every back fence that rattled when you passed it too fast. There's something about that kind of freedom that carves into your bones. You believe it's permanent. You think your town is the whole world, and you've already mapped it out. Nothing bad can sneak up on you when you know every street by heart. That kind of thinking doesn't last. When I was 14, the whole thing shattered. I've never talked about it until now. Not to my mom, not even to the priest that one time when I considered going to confession just to say it out loud. I've carried this around like some sharp thing in my pocket that I'm too afraid to look at. It happened in the fall of 1986. I remember that because my cousin had just mailed me a tape with Invisible Touch on one side and a bunch of Queen B-sides on the other. I was wearing the tape out, flipping it back and forth until it warped, and that night I'd been over at Chris's house. We watched Silver Bullet on VHS and ate microwave pizza that burned the roof of my mouth. Afterward, I wasn't ready to head home, so I took the long way. I remember the air smelling like smoke and dead leaves, the kind of October smell that still makes my chest tighten. I pedaled through the quiet part of the neighborhood, past the old church, over the creek bridge, and into Ridgeway Circle. It was a cul-de-sac, maybe 8 or 10 houses, nothing remarkable, just trimmed hedges, single-car garages, orange porch lights humming. I'd ridden it 100 times. And that night was no different until it was. As I came around the curve, something in the corner of my eye caught me. One of the front windows was wide open, no curtains. The lights were on inside, bright enough to see everything, and a man stood in the living room facing away from the glass. He was pacing, agitated. There was a woman standing in front of him, and she wasn't moving. At first, I thought they were just arguing. My dad yells like that sometimes when he gets drunk. I'd seen enough adult tension to know the signs, but then the man stopped. He turned to face her, raised something in his hand, and the light hit it just right. It was metal, long, sharp, a knife or something like that. He stepped forward, and then he drove it into her chest. One strike, fast and hard. She jolted, bent in half, and crumpled out of sight. And then he looked up, right at me. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I just froze, straddling my bike in the middle of the street. His face was blank, drained of color. His eyes were like glass, but they didn't blink. They didn't move. He stared through that window like he had expected me to be there, like I was a part of it. My hands were still locked around the handlebars when my knees finally buckled and I slid off the seat, hiding behind a parked Buick across the street. My whole body shook. I could hear my heart beat my ears, a dull thud that drowned everything else out. I crouched there for what felt like half an hour, my back pressed against cold metal. I was afraid to look again, but eventually I had to. I leaned out, careful and slow. The window was dark. No man, no woman. No light, just the flicker of a television screen bouncing off the walls. I got back on my bike and took off. I don't remember the route, not exactly, just that I rode under every street lamp I could find, like staying in the light could somehow protect me. I didn't stop pedaling until I got home. I dumped the bike on the front lawn and ran inside, locked the door behind me, checked it twice. My mom was asleep in bed, and the TV was still playing the late news. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I sat on the couch for a while, not even pretending to relax, just trying to figure out if I was still sane. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, cassette still spinning in the Walkman until it clicked. The next morning, I checked the newspaper. There was nothing. No report of a domestic dispute, no stabbing, no death. I checked again the day after, still nothing. I listened to the scanner for a few nights in a row, trying to make sense of the police chatter, but all I heard were traffic stops and noise complaints. Nothing like what I saw. I tried to find the house again, rode the loop during the day, studied each yard, every window, but the place didn't look the same. The houses all blurred together, brick facades, two-step porches, planters, and flagpoles. I couldn't be sure anymore which one had been the scene. They all looked too clean, too normal. So I didn't tell a soul. It wasn't just the fear, though. It was the look on his face, that stillness, like I hadn't just seen him, like he had seen me. If I talked, I was afraid he'd find me, show up outside my window one night and make sure I never said another word. So I just kept my mouth shut for a week, then a month, then 10 years. By the time I graduated high school, it felt like something from a dream. I moved away, took a job, started living on my own, but I never stopped thinking about it. And even now, every time I see a man staring too long through a window or a news story about a missing woman, I wonder if that was the one, if they finally found her. But no one ever did. There's never been anything in the paper. No police file, no arrest, no obituary. Just a hole in the world where something awful happened and no one else seems to know. So I'm writing this now because I don't want to carry it anymore. And if something happens to me, if I disappear or end up dead in a ditch or jump out of my window one night for no reason, I want this story out there. Somewhere, anywhere, even if no one believes it. I saw it, I was there, and I never forgot.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.